How's it going, y'all? So one of my Discord users asked me if I can kind of give him some feedback on his code, and I'm gonna clone his repo and just try to run his app and try to refactor wherever I can and give him some feedback. So if you're a beginner, I think this will be a great video to kind of watch because you're gonna see me doing a decent amount of refactoring, hopefully, and kind of understanding a piece of code that I haven't really seen before. So let's just go into the Star Wars API code base and let's just go ahead and see if we can get this thing running. So the first thing off the bat, always check out the README, see if the README is good and if the README actually explains how to run the application. Since I know JavaScript, I mean, I think you use create React app to spin this up, but I do need to do an npm install to set up some of these dependencies. But I mean, it says how to run it, npm start, it seems. So let's just go ahead and run npm start and let's see if we get a UI running and kind of check this stuff out. Let's first of all, I think his main thing is like he's saying that something is slow. I'm not really sure what he's saying is slow, but let's just test it out and see what happens if I click some of these buttons. First of all, nothing is displaying. I don't know if that's intentional, but I think there's a Star Wars API that he's kind of hitting, and we're going to be checking some of that stuff out. So if you look here, it looks like he hits a Star Wars API to get the people of page 1, and as you click on the pages, it displays them. But there's nothing being displayed here, so that's one thing we could probably try to fix. But let's look at his source code. This is just a create React app application. And if you look at this code right here, so I think he has a majority of the code inside the app, which for a small side project, that's not bad. But one thing you'll notice is like the styling is just not consistent, right? There's stuff that's like unindented. There's stuff that's like not properly spaced, like this compared to this. So one thing off the bat I would say is like install Prettier and have it auto format on save. Like it's super easy to get set up. So as you notice, I saved and it basically fixed all the indentation of this code. So that's the first thing I recommend that you do is always make sure you have a linter setup that's making your code look nice. Secondly, like anywhere you have code that's commented out, just delete it. But let's read through this. So he has an app component and he sets up some state variables and he has some methods that are basically used to fetch people back page, that next page URL. I'm not really too sure what this stuff does, but we will figure it out. I guess this is kind of like your Axios request methods or your services or your API calls. So one thing I would do is like not couple your Axios calls directly in your component. I would just make a different file here called like, you can call it services. Some people call it API. It doesn't really matter. But maybe what I would do is actually put like a method here called like fetch people.js. And export const fetch people, and that could be a method that does this Axios stuff, right? So you kind of want to abstract away your Axios calls from your React component logic. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to go ahead and allow the person to pass in the next page URL. Although I think next page URL seems kind of strange. I don't know if like their API returns a next page. Looks like it does. I think it would make more sense to have this thing actually like take in a page parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and just take in a page here and we're going to just do this and we're going to take in a page. And I believe the API, sorry if my head's blocking that, but I believe the API said page is equal to that. Let's go back. Page is equal to 1 or 2. I'm going to default it to 1. I think that's the default page. So again, what am I trying to do here? I'm just trying to like clean up this code a little bit and slowly get it to a better state. One thing I will point out is that this API, you probably want to abstract some of the stuff away into like a shared, I'll say like const base URL, something like that. Or you can name it like Star Wars API URL, base URL. This is typically the approach that we see in a lot of places where you'll put like a base URL and then you'll put something like this. This allows you to kind of like potentially swap this out when you're doing local development versus actual like production development. If you had like a local Star Wars API set up, like or some mocks set up, it could be easy to just basically, you know, get this from an environment variable like this and have it default into something else like that. But you know, baby steps. So this is probably a better approach where this should return some results. And then instead of actually doing that, I could just say people is equal to await, fetch people, and then I could say like the page here, which I don't think we have a page. So I would probably say set page and make that a new state variable. Use state is equal to 1. Go ahead and do that. All right, so instead of having Axios calls here, we could basically just do something like this. Now, where is he calling fetch people? He calls it over here. Persons is equal to fetch people. And technically, like, we don't need to know what the next page URL and the back page URL is. Maybe it depends on the API that you're using, but I don't know. Something seems kind of off about those. So what I'm going to actually do, I'm just going to delete all that stuff. And we're actually just going to fetch the page. So when you call get people, it's actually just going to call this fetch people API service that we basically created up here. And that should grab the people from this method. Okay. Now, let's look at back page is not defined. So back button. I guess I need to create the go back a page, but honestly, I'll just say previous page. One thing that's good to point out is, yes, is back page. My methods, I like to name them to actually be like verbs. So I'm gonna go like go to previous page, or I could say go back one page, right? It's a little bit more descriptive about like what this is doing when you click on this button. And technically you don't need to have an E here, like it's gonna be passed by default. So I'm gonna go ahead and just create a method up here called go back one page. And I'm gonna say go back one page. And that is going to basically say set page of page -1. But you want to make sure you don't go into the negatives, right? So this is a little trick you can do. Math dot max of 0 in the page -1. So that'll prevent us from going to like, you know, page 0. I guess page 1 is the max, the lowest we should go. I'm gonna make another one called go forward one page. And I'm gonna go ahead and just like increment page ++ or page +1. How about that? And we're going to go ahead and call this go forward one page. So now the buttons actually call methods that are more descriptive of what they're supposed to do, right? They either go back a page or forward a page, and all they do is increment or decrement some page counter. Now, one thing you can actually do is you can use an effect and listen for when that page changes, right? So I'm going to listen to when the page is incremented or decremented. And then we can actually fetch the people and, you know, do some of this logic here. So let's just look at this code. He has like a fetch people method, which calls the fetch people service that we kind of created. And then he has to like basically fetch all the home worlds for all of the people. And then he has to basically, I don't know what he's doing here. I will say I could probably clean all this stuff up. I'm going to go ahead and put all of this function here, functionality inside the use effect. And I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to try to clean this up a little bit. So one thing that sucks about React and like async await is that you can't like put an async here and do that. So you actually have to like do a self-executing function basically. It's super hacky. I kind of hate React because of this, but I'm going to put that in here just so we have access to async await to fetch the people. Maybe I should call this people instead of persons. And for every person, okay, so here's another thing. Don't name stuff thing. Don't name stuff to. New persons to. Like, try to find better names for stuff. Like, spend some extra time to think about this, because instead of thing, this is a person, right? It makes more sense to call it person. Now, again, like, this is an Axios call. I'm guessing homeworld is a URL, so that's kind of strange. I'll keep this in here for now, but maybe we can kind of refactor that. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do more mapping. So if you fetch the people here, it looks like he's just kind of doing some mapping, some chaining here. So I think we can kind of combine these. And in fact, I think we could probably do... I'm not too sure what he's doing here. He has a URL. And then he's like doing something like this. Homeworld data name. I think he's just doing this so like he can get homeworld find URL person homeworld. I don't know if this is actually important. I don't know if he was setting this up so that he can use it later on. But I think what he really wants is like this. He wants to get the person's homeworld who matches the URL config URL. I'd have to look at their API. Maybe this is kind of set up weird. But I'm going to go ahead and homeworld. I'm not really sure what he's doing here, to be honest with you. I think you can kind of combine these. Like, I don't know why he has two maps, so I'll just go ahead and do that. And then delete the second person, and then set people could just be like, let's see. We might be able to make this more condensed. So we could fetch the people like this. Home world URL. It's so interesting. I don't know why that's happening here. Oh, I see what he's doing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that home world out here. But we could probably return people.map. Sorry, I'm trying to see if there's like a cleaner way to do this. I guess he wants to basically fetch all the home worlds to figure out what the URLs are for those. Anyway, let's just console log this. Again, this is a live coding. I didn't really look at his code beforehand. I'm just trying to clean it up as I'm kind of looking through it. And get species, like we'll come back to this. We'll come back to all this stuff. What we're going to do is see if we can basically clean this up as best as we can. And you might disagree with what I'm doing. You might think that what I'm doing is dumb. I don't know what this test button does. It doesn't do anything, so I'm going to delete it. But if I save this, does this crash? All right, so we have some buttons here. If I click next page, well, off the bat, it should have requested some people. So if I look at the Star Wars API, what is this called? Swappy.dev. It's useful to put the filter here to figure out like what's actually being fetched. So if you look at the results, we do a GET request twice for some reason. That's probably React 18 strict mode doing its double invokes. Yeah, it looks like it's doing double fetches, but that's probably React 18 strict mode, kind of like doing the mount, unmount thing. But we get the data back, we get results, and I think this is kind of like what should be returned from our method. And then we're taking all of these, and let's kind of look through some of the stuff. Like what is going on here? What is he trying to do? So something about homeworld. Homeworld is actually like it's a URL, which is really strange. Like I don't know why you'd have a URL returning your data. That's just like goes against everything I've ever seen with making a REST API. But maybe they're trying to do some type of self-discovery API. It's kind of weird. But understanding this might help you understand more about like the code that we're looking at. But basically, we fetch all these people. We get like 10 back. And then for every single person, we're fetching, it looks like, the planet. And what else are we fetching? I guess these are all the home worlds, right? So if we go back to that result here, where was homeworld again? Okay, so this is the homeworld, the planet. Do they have like a planet ID? It just seems really weird that there's like a URL here, but anyway. I'm not sure, like, what is he trying to display with all these people? So he's passing character list here, and the character list is basically supposed to just display the name. Okay, one thing I'll point out is like put your properties on new lines. Like there's no reason to have all these properties on different lines. So let's clean that up a little bit. So it's actually like legible. I don't have to scroll over a bunch of characters just to be able to see some stuff. Props list. Also do object destructuring here. Like I would just maybe do list here instead of props list. Also, list is kind of a bad name for an argument. Maybe you could call it characters or something. And then you can map over those characters. Instead of saying data, you could do like character here. So now the code like makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, let's see if we can actually get some characters to display. I'm going to actually turn off React 18 strict mode because I'm assuming I have some type of limit that I'm allowed to do with this API. And I don't want the React 18 strict mode to like keep on doing a ton of requests against our API, and then I end up getting blocked, and then my tutorial is basically screwed up. Well, I guess this isn't even a tutorial. This is me just hacking at some stuff. All right, so more code cleanup. Why is this not working? Let's look at the console here. Cannot read property map character list. So the thing that we're passing into character list is undefined and it's causing it to crash. So if we look at the actual character list and we're passing in characters here, we should probably do that. Another reason you should use TypeScript, it would have warned me and told me that I was doing something wrong here, but he's using JavaScript, so not going to complain too much about that. All right, so what can we do to actually get this displaying the characters? Because it's still not displaying them. So let's see, we're probably not even setting the characters up. So let's look up to where we have characters here, and we need to set characters at some point. I think in the code I commented out, it looks like he does this here. So this is getting kind of crazy. I also don't know what the difference between people and characters are. Is fetch people an actual like real good terminology for it? Maybe it should be like fetch heroes, fetch characters. But I'm gonna go ahead and try to look at this real quick. So what do we get? For all of these, we get like I think these are all the planets. I think he's trying to combine the planets with the people or something. I don't really know. So like the homeworld, he's trying to find the same homeworld that is related to that person. So I think what I would have done instead is for every person, loop over them. And we could probably do something like this, where we get the homeworld. This could be an asynchronous function. I know you can't really do async await inside of maps, but you can still treat it like it's a promise. So this will ultimately return a promise because I put async here, and this will give us the homeworld like this. We might have to actually do like homeworld.data or something. Like this might have to be data dot of homeworld. And I think what he's trying to do is basically for every person, he was trying to put the homeworld inside of the person object. And then he also has a homeworld with a capital W. That's another red flag. I'm not really sure why he's doing that. I mean, I'll keep it consistent. I think what he's trying to do is just like, this should be called homeworld name, but we'll refactor that in a bit. But this should have the homeworld data name. I'm just going to go ahead and say homeworld.name. I'm assuming that this is hopefully going to work. But yeah, so we're looping over. This is getting kind of confusing. We are looping over all of the people. For every person, we are basically making a new promise that's going to have the person combined with the homeworld data. So this is technically going to be like the people with homeworlds. So that's a more descriptive name. If you I can clean this code up more. I'm just trying to figure out how to wrap my head around it, but I want to keep on seeing if I can make some progress. So I think this stuff can go away, hopefully. If I understand what he is trying to do. And then for set people, we could just say people with homeworlds. And let's see if that helps display anything. It doesn't seem like it. But if we were to print this out at least, let's just make sure that this is an array of like actual people. So we got an array here. We got Skywalker. Is homeworld on here? It is. Homeworld is Tatooine. And then he has like all this homeworld data. So I think the data is still correct. But we have lots of room for improvement for this entire refactoring. I'll put it to do here. Refactor more, please. But he had some more stuff going on. So he had like a get species. If you look at the original use effect here, he gets the people and then he gets the species. So what I'm going to do is look at the get species now, which I think it's this entire thing. And he basically people filter map. I guess I wonder why he did this in a separate call and why not just do it here where we're also doing all this like asynchronous fetching stuff. So I think what he's trying to do is filter out. He only wants things that have species. I guess some of this data might have a lot of species. So let's look at like here, maybe this has like different species. It's an array of species. So now he has to go and fetch even more data. The Star Wars API is crazy. But I mean, I think what I would actually do is like I would do this traversal inside of one method instead of doing all this other stuff. So like maybe when we're fetching the homeworlds for the people, we could also like just fetch the species for the people. So here, like we could basically say, trying to figure out what he's doing with species here. So it looks like he's trying to find the first species. Check this. Okay, let me fix that real quick so I don't have errors in my face. If the species is undefined, set it equal to human. Otherwise, set it equal to something else. Set the character. Set X test. Okay, so there's less, just to make sure there's less stuff, I'm going to remove everything that has the word test in it. Like this stuff is just not finished yet. I think he was using people as like an intermediate state thing. And ultimately what we want is we want set characters because that's what's used here. So I think if we can combine get species with this function, we'll be like at a much better state. But what he's trying to do here is he wants to loop over every species and just get the first one. Okay, so he's just getting the first species. So what we could do here is we could also say like data species is equal to await axios.get person species of 0. But I only want to do that if there is species of length. Okay, so make that extra request to get the first species entry if and only if there's actually like an array of defined species here. So just get the first one. And then what we're going to do is when we get that back, we can simply say, I'll say let species is equal to null. And then I will say species from API, do this. I can clean this up, so don't judge it too hard yet. But I think what he ultimately wants to do here is he's trying to put that species thing here. So I'll just go ahead and just put that here. But then he also tries to set the species to human if it's not defined. Otherwise, he does this. So I think we might need to do something similar to this where species is actually equal to human. You know, I could just do that. Set it the default to human. If there is a species you can use, fetch it. And I think what we want to do is we want to just basically do something like this. Although I'm not sure why his data name here. Let me do this. All right, is this cleaner? I don't know, but I also don't know if I'm implementing exactly what he wants. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and do that. I'm going to delete all this extra code, delete the use effect. And let's look at some of this stuff. All right. So I think it's actually working. If I go to the next page, loading all the new species. Next page, does it again. Go back. Can I go back until it crashes? Yeah, I think we made it better. I think it works. We're displaying stuff. So let's do a final like refactoring because I do think there's some more stuff that we can improve in terms of like legibility. So this is like a magic number kind of. I think I would rather have like const default species be defined up here and set that to human. And then we could basically just default it here. Again, this is doing like Axios calls in the component. I don't really like that. But the way this API is set up, maybe it makes sense to do that. It just seems really, really strange that their API returns you URLs instead of actual data and IDs. So sometimes, in my opinion, it's okay to use promise chaining. Honestly, I think promise chaining sometimes makes stuff cleaner because like having this additional function that we're calling just so we can do async await, I don't know if it really adds much. So what I personally like to do is I'd probably call this, and then I would say call a then, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to remove a lot of that. And then what this is doing is we are going to basically let's see, return a promise of all the people. We don't want to wait. We just want to return the promise all here. And then we could say then set characters. Simple as that. I like to put my thens kind of indented on new lines, but that's just my preference. So let's look at this. We fetch all the people, and then we do another promise all. And for every person, we are then going to fetch their homeworld and their species with different Axios calls. Now this isn't the most performant because this is going to block a little bit. We could probably do another promise all as well to speed this up. So let's see if we can maybe do something like that. How can we speed this up? So instead of having it be two separate async await calls, these can be in parallel. And let's just try that. Let's just try, I will do something like this. I'll say homeworld, and then I'll say species is equal to await promise all. And we're going to do two promises here. The first one is going to be something like this. And then the second one is going to be this call. And then I will say if person species length, I'm going to go ahead and just say promise, or if the length is, yeah, if the length is defined, we'll do this. Otherwise, we're going to say promise.resolve a undefined. Maybe. I don't know if this is cleaner. This might just be more confusing. But now we have homeworld and species, and those two things will be defined, hopefully. Data. How did we do this before? Am I doing this right? Data is homeworld. So, homeworld. Oh, we don't need to be undefined. We just default the default species. So yeah, I don't know if this is cleaner, but we need to basically do a dot then here and get the data. And we want data.name. Tatooine. It's still working, so I think our refactoring's fine. I just don't know if this is the cleanest thing. I feel like there's something easier we could do. I mean, we could abstract some of these things away to like, I don't know. We could maybe do some helper functions maybe. Person species dot length. I'm gonna go ahead and rename this to homeworld name. And honestly, like if you look at the character list, homeworld name should be here. Homeworld name. I'm gonna keep this consistent. All this code, like I'll keep it in because like this is his code, but not sure what he's planning to do with all this stuff. I'll go ahead and save that. All right, so now if I go back to the app, I don't think we even need to pass in homeworld because if you look at where he's using it, he's only using the homeworld name. So technically, you don't even need to set homeworld here. The only reason we're using homeworld is to get the name. So technically, we could just say dot name, and I could say dot homeworld name, and then we could just do this. Homeworld name. Is this cleaner? Let's see. So we fetch the people, and then for every person, we're going to make separate calls by doing a map. And then we are going to, yeah, maybe it was I can't tell if what I'm doing is just more complicated than what it needs to be. This whole thing could probably be abstracted into like a separate function maybe. People map async person. Like we could make this into a helper function called like fetch ancillary data for person. And that could take in a person, and then we could basically just do this return here. Do something like this. So like the person comes in, we're going to do all this logic that we just kind of abstracted away. And instead of doing like all of this, I could just do this, I believe. So now it's a little bit easier to understand maybe. If I put this on a one-liner, maybe that'll make it easier to read. Let's see if this still works. Go to the console, make sure there's no errors. Go ahead and click next page. So get back all the things. Yeah, I don't know. Does this seem like it's cleaner, y'all? I don't like how we have Axios in here, to be honest, but I don't know if we can kind of get around that because this is a URL, not like an actual homeworld ID. But yeah, did we make this cleaner? Let's see. So we went from, if I do a git diff real quick, we went from 118 lines of code to 52. So we reduced the lines of code in half. That's a win. I also kind of deleted a lot of, actually I didn't really delete a lot of comments, but yeah, if you were to compare this logic where he has two separate functions and they're both like, they need to be invoked to what I did, I guess the question is my code cleaner and easier to understand? And I'll leave that up to you to decide. But if you guys enjoyed watching me kind of refactor someone else's code, feel free to, you can do this as well. You can send me a link to your GitHub repo. You can ask me to refactor something simple and we can kind of just do a video about it. I think this is good practice for others to learn how to read through other people's code, refactor the code, and just get better at trying to find better ways to keep your code clean. I'm not 100% happy with what's going on here, but at this point, it's good enough, kind of. You can kind of refactor this and change it up a little bit. But I think it's good enough. So anyway, be sure to join my Discord if you want to ask me direct questions or kind of talk to my community of other developers. And yeah, have a good day and happy coding.